I'm Stephen Scott Bottoms, and I'm a professor of drama at Manchester University. What that means is that I'm interested in stories and in what happens to people. Let's take the big Boxing Day flood that hit Shipley in Christmas 2015. And I happen to know quite well two ladies who live next door to each other on a street called Lower Hull, which is down in Lower Baildon. And the water at surface level of the flooding coming out of the river didn't actually, it came up to their top doorsteps where their houses were, because they were on the far side of a car park from the river itself. So the water crept up the car park and then appeared to stop at the front door. So from the outside, you'd think, well, no problem at all. What happened in practice, though, on the inside, is that their cellars flooded, like, 6 or 7 feet of floodwater in the cellar. So one lady, in one of her house, she had an electricity meter in the basement, in the cellar, and it completely shorted out, and she was without power for a week at Christmas until they managed to, and she had to go around the houses trying to find out who was responsible for reconnecting her. Was it npower? Was it the National Grid? Was it, she spent like £50 on telephone top-ups or something just trying to get that sorted. And meanwhile, next door, the other lady, the water in her cellar partially collapsed the foundations, and her living room floor caved in. And that then took, she basically had to live in a hotel in the Ibis in Shipley, being put up there by her housing association for the next 4 or 5 months until they got around to fixing her floor. So Barney, tell me a little bit about you and how you're involved with this stuff. You're an engineer, aren't you?
I'm an engineer, yes, and I'm used to be Professor of Environmental Engineering at Sheffield, and I've had a lot of research on urban rivers, and I decided it was time I did something near home. So I got organised to set up a group called the Friends of Bradford Beck, and we've taken interest in trying to improve the Bradford Beck for the benefit of Bradford ever since. A lot of what we've done has been trying to influence the people in charge, the council, the Environment Agency, Yorkshire Water, and we're slowly winning on that front, in that they're all making attempts to clean up the pollution of the Beck and trying to restore it to be a bit more like a natural river. But one of the things we find much more difficult to deal with are the flooding issues.
Why is that? What's the, I mean, the Beck, the unnatural Beck, if you like, a lot of it's underground, isn't it? I mean, from an outside point of view, that would seem like something, if the river's underground, it doesn't even affect people, does it? So what's the problem?
Well, it's underground because it's been squeezed and squeezed into a smaller and smaller space and then built over. And so the culvert in which it's buried can get blocked, and there were some really severe floods in the 60s and 80s because the water just couldn't fit through the tunnel that ran under Bradford. So those are the kind of issues that arise from trying to hide a Beck. But of course, they've built on the floodplain. So naturally, a river would flood out onto the wet lowland areas near it, and that would absorb huge quantities of water. And that's just not happening on Bradford. There's also floods above Bradford, so up on Middlebrook, up towards Thornton and Allerton. They have flooding up there. And that arises really because too much water runs off the hills and off the city. Flooding happens because the land is made more impermeable. We build our cities, we extend our houses, we concrete over the yard, we try and push the water away from the urban areas, and of course it rushes down into the Beck and then floods out into the properties that have been built on the floodplain.
So would it make a difference if people did a bit more gardening and maybe didn't turn their front gardens into driveways and things like that?
Well, more gardening, more trees. Trees are great for somehow absorbing water and making the soil more permeable. Yes, and front driveways. Instead of pouring concrete all over it, put gravel down. Build a rainwater tank to catch the water off your roof and let it out slowly after the rain stopped. Build a planter, get the water from the gutters to run down into a big planting trough and the water can get evaporated back to the sky. So there are lots of things you can do at home to help.